Welcome to Love and Money Secrets TV. And boy, do we have a wonderful, wonderful show for you lined up today with things that you probably haven't heard any other place before. I have my beautiful friend and gem, Barry Selby, here with us today. Barry, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself? This has been such a joy to be here.
It is such a joy to be here. And where are you right now as we broadcast so that our listeners and viewers can relate to where you are?
Well, I'm based, as I've been for many years, in Los Angeles, California, although my accent puts me from England originally, so I don't sound like a Californian.
Well, wonderful. All right. So you're in the City of Angels, just a wee bit north from me here in Southern California, and I'm in the beach community. So let's dive in deep and let's talk about how did you get on this path of becoming a love and relationship expert? What was the kernel? What was that little seed that began it all? And then you had certain realizations.
Well, being a slow learner, it wasn't just one seed, it was several.
Okay.
Just to be transparent.
Okay.
Um, and basically, to put it succinctly, I've been in the personal development field for 40 years now. And that put me in a place where I would notice and observe things about myself, which was a good thing to have. However, it also meant I didn't necessarily stop myself making mistakes, in particular in relationships. And the biggest lesson, I suppose, if you want to put the biggest kernel of insight that happened was after my last big bad breakup. And I put that in terms of like big bad breakup. It sounds very impressive. But basically what happened was is that I went through three relationships in a row where the end result was the same feeling of loss and breakup. And I felt like somehow I was doing something that wasn't working. But kindly, thankfully, and annoyingly, my last breakup was blatant enough to tell me the truth without much sugarcoating. She basically told me she kind of read me the riot act, and in fact, she was really upset because I disappointed her because I wasn't who I wasn't who she thought I was because she'd seen me when we first met a certain way, but at the end of the relationship, I wasn't that thing. So really, it was her misperception. However, it was my lesson to learn. And even though I've never seen her since that breakup, if I ever see her again, I'll be thanking her because it was because of her that everything I've done since then, including the path I've been on and the book I wrote and everything I talk about and all my teachings, really were inspired or instigated because of that breakup. So as much as it was painful and upsetting to have a breakup, the benefit was that I really got to look at myself in the mirror clearly and really went, so, okay, so what am I missing? What don't I know? Even though I've been on this journey for many, many years, I still wasn't getting it, quote, right. And that led me to the work I've been doing now.
That led you to what you're doing now. So I love the fact that, first of all, that breakup was your shakeup.
Hmm.
And you did something that I want to make sure that everybody pays attention to here. Because rather than lash out and be on the defense and blame her, you didn't do that. You were aware enough and conscious enough to listen, to hear, to acknowledge, and to recognize that there was some sort of disconnect, not just between you and her, but even within yourself. And so you listened, you observed, and you learned from that. That was a teaching moment. You could have done the opposite, which many people will lash out, fight back. No, 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 you're wrong, yada, yada, be in defense. And then they go on to repeat the same lesson in a different place with a different face
Oh, yeah.
until they come to the realization. So let's talk about that because I think that that is really the springboard from which everything changed because you were able to go in and say, okay, wait a minute. You talked about self-reflection. Elaborate a little
Mhm.
bit more on that.
Well, the thing was, and to underscore why I didn't defend myself, is because I knew she was right. I didn't have a leg to stand on if I tried defending myself. So I basically went, you know what? I get it. It's like, it's me. Even though I clearly saw that she had stuff too. But that was the thing is,
Everybody
I
does.
knew that if I tried to pick apart her flaws, in quotes, it'd be like who can race to the bottom first? Nobody wins.
Who can, I love that. Who can race to the bottom first? Yeah.
Right. Because the thing was ultimately, as much as I didn't like hearing what she was telling me, I knew it was the truth. to the degree, although it was convoluted, it wasn't accurate truth. It was enough to give me the spark to go forward, hence the self-reflection. And really, what happened after that was for the next couple of months, I was basically sort of, I jokingly say, I was just asking God what was going on. I mean, I have a very personal, intimate relationship with my version of God and or spirit. And so basically, I was just saying to spirit because I've had many instances of having insight, reflection, feedback, understanding, um, disillusionment, reflections back from spirit when I have those conversations, because it's the high self or the inner, what do you want to call it, the inner self, the guidance. And so I said, it's like, obviously I'm missing something, but what was it? I didn't know what it was. And spirit delivered up the answer a few months later. I should say, um, spirit laid the, I was going to say the trap, laid me the path to find out what I was missing, and that's what I figured out. So to break it down, just so you understand for your listeners and viewers, up to that point, even though I've done all the spiritual work, what I'd really been doing without realizing it, and spiritual work has this feeling of moving more into what I would now call feminine energy, because spirit is very much a feminine balance of energy. The mechanics is more masculine, more macho. But I'd grown up to that point, even all the spiritual work I'd done, up to that point, I only had two ideas of how to be a man in this world. And most men think this way too. One is you get to be tough and strong and basically be the macho man. So you carry machismo, and the extreme of that's being the bad boy, which women are drawn to, but isn't necessarily very healthy. The other extreme that I understood it was what I grew up with and what I was choosing to be was the nice guy. I was a nice guy, an open heart, caring, compassionate, but wasn't very effective because my upbringing in my own family, which I look back on now and see very clearly, was I had a father who was not bullying, but very stoic and very emotionally suppressed and very he wasn't very expressive. So first of all, I never felt I got close to him ultimately. It wasn't like I was being pushed around by him, but I didn't feel like he wasn't open to me. He wasn't open to any of us in the family, really. He was so bottled up, which is, English reserved Jewish man. That's kind of the way it is. And so I saw that as being so what I didn't want to be. So I went to the opposite. The only other way I knew it to be was to be the nice guy, which ended up putting me on the receiving end of being bullied, ended up being receiving end of being around lots of women who loved talking to me but didn't want to date me. I mean, all that stuff was very clear to me going up now. And so my relationships were start up perhaps the way I wanted them to, but end up where I'd be the loser at the end because I was attracting, or I should say, I was attracted to very strong masculine women, really. But I didn't know what masculinity was until after this last breakup. And so that teaching, which I'll get into more detail, really showed me the third option, which is what masculinity is. And that's where I learned how I myself, which is being open-hearted, but also know what I'm about and holding a strong spine and real depth into the core of my being, which is what masculinity for me is about.
That's really fascinating because you talked about insight, reflection, and feedback.
Yep.
Because when you went within, you're like, okay, to your higher power, you're to God. Some people like to call it the universe. Doesn't matter what you name it because it doesn't really care what you name it because it's the all. But the bottom line is you went within and you're like, okay, you were looking at insight, at reflection, and at feedback. It's like, what's going on here? And you knew to ask that effective question and then let it go. And then you said it took about 90 days before then that was revealed to you, probably at the perfect time where the wound wasn't so raw. And then you had enough incubation period to then, because the divine created you, so it knows the perfect timing for everything. So then you started to have the revelations, the realizations. Realizations are things being made more real, right? And so you're starting to have this knowingness of, oh, wow, this is really at the heart of what's going on here. And so what would you recommend to someone? Because, the most important relationship that we will have on the planet, it will always be with ourselves first.
Absolutely, yes.
And to the degree that you have a good relationship with yourself, that you don't have self-loathing, that you don't, are constantly in a pity party with yourself, to the degree that you are, again, in a good relationship with yourself, will be the degree to which you can be in a good relationship with others. Because as within, so without, as above, so below. So kind of bring people into the inner workings of that. And how did you digest that? Because I know that you didn't know what you were doing because that was uncharted waters. And
Hmm.
this is so true for all of us. Well, at least anyone who can pass the mirror test where you can fog it up, right?
Absolutely.
And for some of us, it's in relationships. For some people, it's like, oh my goodness, their relationship might be okay, but it could be that now it's like, oh, they have this horrible diagnosis, or they just got a call from the bank saying, you know what, it's time for you to file for bankruptcy. So that has to do with a relationship with money, but going inward. So talk a little bit more about that and how those 90 days, and then each quarter of the
Well,
year after that, how that kind of unfolded for you, because I can't wait for you to reveal the name of your.
the thing was, is to be transparent. It wasn't easy to go 90 days waiting for the answer. So
Well, you
much as
didn't
I
know
did,
it
I
was
was
going
like,
to be 90 days. It just
well, that's
worked
the
out.
other part is that I do have, as I said, I have a good relationship, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily the best partner in that conversation back then. I was like, I would basically ask the question about what's going on, what am I missing? But I did ask the question more than once in 90 days. I did go back and go because I didn't get an answer. It's like, and a week later or 2 weeks later, it's like, what's going on? What am I missing? And I would do a lot of self-reflection, but I wasn't getting the answers because I didn't have enough understanding of what was at fault. Because what she had told me in the breakup was, and as I shared other places, in a lot of ways, I did remind her of her ex-husband. She was in the middle of divorcing. He and I were very similar. No surprise because she was repeating patterns too. But what she'd wanted was a man who was really strong in leadership and really got things done like her. And she remembered she idolized her grandfather, who was this cowboy back in the South, like, 60, 70 years ago, who really knew where he was, took care of things, got things handled. And she loves that about him and wanted a partner like that. And when
Mhm.
she saw me initially, I was running teams, I was volunteering in a place where she goes, and a lot of people I ran their team. I was a big player, so to speak, in that sense. And so she thought I was all that, but I wasn't. I was doing that in that role. But when it came to being in a relationship, being off duty, I fell back into that nice guy behavior. So for the 90 days, there was this questioning and ongoing um, waiting and impatience to get the answer of like, what am I missing? Because I didn't want to risk doing it again. So I was like, no, no way I'm going to date anymore. At least at this point, of course, 9 days isn't that long to wait, but it felt like an eternity because I was impatient. So
Oh, I'm sure no one can relate on things instantly now. I'm sure you're the
right.
only one out of 7 billion people. You and I are co-CEOs of that club.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it became so around mid-March because we broke up beginning of the year. So around middle of March, somewhere around there, the moment and at that point, this is 2000, early 2007. My comfort level talking to beautiful women who didn't know already was very minimal. I didn't feel comfortable. Didn't I felt nervous. I wasn't very. It was like ill at ease, to say the least. So anyway, I was walking out of the spiritual center I attend after a service, and this woman was walking in who was I never met her before, but she was like blonde, beautiful, like long flowing hair, and a white sundress on. Maybe it's March, but it was warm weather, so she had a white sundress on, beautiful tan, and the way I could describe her, she was glowing. And the way I imagine it was, Spirit had put like neon signs overhead pointing at her, saying, "Talk to this woman," like almost like arrows pointing at her. And I had to go up to her. I mean, I knew I had no choice, even though I didn't feel comfortable, which of course is where the growth happens oftentimes, is outside the comfort zone. So I went up to her and said something like, and how the words were, I don't remember now, but it's something like, um, "Excuse me, but you're glowing. Where did you come from?" And it was something like that. And she burst out laughing, which is great. So that was easy. I broke the
Good
ice.
start. Yeah, that's a great, you know,
Yeah. So
welcome.
so she basically told me she'd come back from this retreat from this teacher and said, you want this woman doing? And I said, that sounds interesting. And she did was giving me the introductory workshop this following weekend, like 3 days later, like perfect timing. So it's like once it became clear, the dominoes started falling into place. So the
Say
following
that
that
again.
weekend,
Say that again.
the dominoes or the pieces started falling into place.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because you took that risk, you had courage, you did something that you normally wouldn't have done, but you followed that intuitive lead. And now
Well,
the
I,
doors
I,
are
I I wouldn't say intuitive. I would say I had no choice because the feeling was it's like I felt like, as I said, like imagining the neon like arrows pointing at this woman. It's almost like I was like being guided, led, pushed, forced to talk to this woman against my better, excuses or judgments to
yeah.
say talk to this woman. So it wasn't so much. It was intuitive. It was more just, I got to do this.
Yeah.
almost like giving up the fight.
So it wasn't a thought in the head. It was like this visceral solar plexus drive thing. So
Yep.
that's good for people to note, because this is not all about your intellectual, based on your knowledge, your experience, what you've
Oh
learned
yeah.
in school. No, this was in a deeper place that was impelling you to move forward. Oh, so keep going. This is getting good.
Well, this is one of the skills I've really honed and developed over the years. Is one of the things I love is that once you start learning how to do this, because first of all, it's trustworthy. It is something that is dependable. And yes, absolutely, it's not an academic or a mindset thing. It's really almost gut instinct. And if you do any studies in human biology, you know that our gut has got as much intelligence and more nerve endings than our brain does. So yes, it does have wisdom to give us. So yes, I know that one. So anyway, so that weekend, I was at the introduction to this workshop from this teacher, and they were giving in this like free workshop these principles and teachings, and everything they said was like, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, that makes sense, that fits. And even though, again, I've done all this work for many years, the way they explained it and the way they presented the content and the way they explained this thing called masculine and feminine polarity, which is the first time I'd really gotten it, I went, this is what I need to study. I need to learn this. I need to understand why I'd missed it. Not so much why I missed it, but why I've not been playing at this level. And they talked about how basically and there's one piece of the teaching, they did a bunch of stuff they did through the whole workshop, but one thing they talked about was the shells we build. Because when we're born, innately, we are naturally ourselves. You know, we're not influenced, we're not tainted, we're not colored, we're not painted with any sort of brush at that point. So we're totally neutral as we are. But then life happens. So, for example, as a young girl, a baby is born as a girl, she might be born into a family where she has brothers and she has to become like a tomboy to stand up to them.
To
So she starts
survive.
putting on a masculine shell, even though she's naturally feminine when she was born, she becomes masculine on top of that. But in her teens, she starts to realize she wants to start wearing dresses and skirts. So she starts putting a feminine shell. But the thing is, what happens is we don't take shells off, we put more shells on. And so we're layer upon layer upon layer of flip-flopping between masculine and feminine ways of being based on what the world needs of us. And for us boys, sometimes we move back and forth masculine and feminine just the same way. So when we become adults, we have 5,
Oh,
10, 15 layers of stuff on top of us that's not who we really are. And then we meet somebody who's also got 15, 5, 10, 15 layers themselves, and we're trying to figure out how to do a relationship together. We wonder why it's hard to do. And when I heard that, it was like, it makes so much sense. I know this. But on the same level, there was this thing that when we really learn how to take away those other shells, I mean, trust our innate masculine or feminine nature, that's when things start to shift. And that's what changed for me. That's when I went through the training the following July, the 3-day intensive weekend where they dived into this. And at the end of the weekend, I owned it. I got it viscerally. I really felt in the core of my being what it felt like to be an authentic masculine man. Because we spent 3 days going deeper and deeper in that level for the men. Women did the feminine version.
uh-huh.
And so at the end of the weekend, we stood facing each other, 50, about 100 people in the room, 50 men, 50 women, facing each other. And we as men, side by shoulder, shoulder to shoulder with our brothers, like rooted into the earth in our true masculine core, our masculine hearts, solid, anchored, like impenetrable, like totally open in that sense, being really empowered with this wall of femininity, women facing us. So at the same time as I was standing on my feet, shoulder to shoulder with my men, this wave of feminine energy was being um what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say thrown at us, but being expressed to us. And I was absolutely in awe of the feminine energy. It's like this wall of femininity, independent of the women themselves, was so overpowering and so enthralling and so tantalizing. I was basically on my knees in worship. I knew in my core of my being that what I've been doing all my life without realizing it is worshiping women or honoring women, that the respect for women was my core value from that point forward. And that's where my life is built from there. That's where my work started from, was back in 2007.
That's absolutely incredible. So basically, in essence, during those 3 days, you had a masculine reset to get back into your true authentic self as
Mhm.
a man. And the women who were there had a female reset to embrace and accept and be their true authentic selves. And as a man, because you can only speak from your man's perspective, as you saw all these women standing in their true authentic power, you felt that life-giving energy, which is what we as women do. We are giving life. That's why we birth children. And then you as men, you can stand in that solid, strong flame. frame and flame. That was the divine was trying to tell me that the flame is that power and that passion and that energy that builds empires.
Hmm.
Because you're getting this life giving energy that's the feminine that's coming towards you. You can build Trump towers. You can create an entire city. You can create whatever it is you want. You could be Nikola Tesla and create free energy for the world. It doesn't matter. The thing is that is part of how the pieces of the puzzle. If you have two males, that's not going to work. Two females, that's also not going to work. You need just like the day needs the night. This is not to be about politically correct, politically not correct, da 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 da. This is, human nature. You need a man and a woman in order to create a child. So we're talking about the energies coming together.
So, but I want to honestly correct, but add something to that conversation, because the way I'm talking about this really is masculine and feminine energy is something that we all carry within us. First of all, it's a spectrum. And
Yes.
the thing about relationships in particular, because I have many friends in the gay community as well, and I understand totally that masculine feminine polarity is where the connection comes from. So independent of gender, because there are men who carry feminine energy who are straight, men who carry feminine energy who are gay,
Absolutely.
women who carry masculine energy who are straight, and women who carry feminine energy who are gay too. So it fluctuates. So what I'm saying is that we're attracted by the polarity that attracts
Polarity.
us.
But
And
even
so
in a gay couple, you have to have one that's in the masculine and you have to have one that's in the feminine. They
absolutely,
can't
yes.
both, they can't be the same. The reason why there is an attraction is because one is carrying the masculine energy and one's carrying the female energy. So as long as you
Right.
have that dynamic, then some of those relationships last longer than heterosexual relationships because
Absolutely.
those roles, and it's just not a roles, it's an energy projection and reception that's taking place. And as long as you have the giving of the masculine energy and the reception of the female energy, it works.
Well, the thing is, and the example I use, which I learned from these teachers, is if you understand how magnets work, that basically you put two north poles of magnets together, they repel each other, they won't go together. If you put a north pole with a south pole, they attract each other automatically. So it's the polarity that works in masculine and feminine behavior too. The
Absolutely.
thing is that in relationship, one of the challenges, and this is another piece of the puzzle to talk about, is that the masculine feminine polarity has to be sometimes recharged, like magnets. Because if you have magnets you put in a drawer for 5, 6 years, the magnetism starts to fade because they're not being recharged. And so what couples do when they don't continually recharge their batteries, they start to become best friends, which
Become
can be
dull.
nice, but it's not particularly sexy or passionate. And so what's recommended is that for men and women or gay couples, whatever it is, whether the masculine partner or feminine partner,
Uh-huh.
if they're losing their
The
polarity, so
charge.
to speak, then do something that will recharge your batteries. So in heterosexual couples, because I'm being heterosexual, it's easy for me to refer to.
Yeah.
For masculine men, do something like going hiking or hunting or camping or doing something physical, like go boxing or play sports. It's something that men can do that recharge their batteries in the masculinity. For feminine women, particularly, I mean, again, transcending genders, talking about just the polarity of energy. For femininity, it gets recharged by connection. So for women, particularly, going to the spa with their girlfriends or even going
Yes.
shopping can be helpful too.
Girls, yeah. It's like
Doing things that, yeah, because it helps women reconnect. The biggest challenge is that when couples are so exclusive, they don't see anybody else socially, they lose touch with that.
yeah.
So it's for men and women in particular, but true for couples in particular, is you want to recharge your batteries, find people of the same polarity to
Do
function
stuff.
with. And men, it's kind of like they talk about how is it metal homes metal, something like that. It's one of the I'm butchering the phrase, but the idea being is that
Iron sharpens iron. In the
right,
all the ancient scriptures, it talks about as iron sharpens iron, so is one man to another. You can't
right.
sharpen
That's the
iron.
power of masculine men with each other, is that we strengthen each other. So
Yes.
it's that, so finding men that we can trust with each other, we can tell our truth to and be supported by and received by. That lets us as men rebuild our strength and our true nature to go back with our partners. So those sort of things are that's just tip of the iceberg, ideas that will help you have healthy relationships with those you want to be with.
So for a man that is watching this show right now,
Hmm.
what would you be, what if you had to, I don't want to say challenge them, But if you want to instead encourage or inspire them to be a better man, what would you say to them or recommend would be the first step for them to start to maybe do, like, how did they get started to start
Mm.
to calibrate and see, well, because it's a spectrum, it's a different shades of gray. There are guys that are very light shade of gray masculine, and there are others that are like black, right?
Right. And
So how would you encourage any man watching this? Because it just so happens that more of my viewers are male than females at the moment.
Mhm.
And it changes, but right now there's more men than women across the globe. So what would you challenge them or encourage them to take a look at? What would be the first steps?
It's like picking which first step to start with. One thing for definitely for sure is because many men, and I was one, so just have a job just to pay the bills. We don't live our calling or our passion or our purpose in the world. The true masculine, the ultimate masculine expression is alignment with purpose. I talked about how one thing I discovered being a masculine man was like an open heart and straight spine. That spine is direction, clarity, purpose. And for us men who want to be more in our truth, in our strength, in our natural polarity, having clarity of direction and purpose, which may be a new vocation or career, it may be a hobby, it may be some, nonprofit calling. Even it might be changing social conditions, or it might be raising a family. Because some men's purpose is their family, but most men it's something outside of that. So, for one thing, is for a man to do is if he doesn't know what he's up to on the planet, if he hasn't got a thing that drives him, that pulls him more than anything else on the planet, find out what that is. It might be leading a company, it might be doing something, writing a book, it might be doing something else, but finding is that really aligns to your truth, that expresses your heart in the world, and that is empowering and inspiring. That's probably one of the things that men can start with. The second thing is, and this is something that I read because I've studied with several teachers, and one of my favorite teachers is David Data, and he has a book out called The Way of the Superior Man, which I recommend every man should read. In fact, every woman should read it too, because it explains how a man in his true masculinity would express. And one of the chapters in his book he talks about is, and this is one thing I had to learn the hard way in a sense, was to live as if your father is dead. And I say that way because what he talks about in the book, and it really brought home to me this point, is that for many men on an innate, on a childlike level, we believe that our father is God. And I don't mean that literally, but energetically, meaning that we are not um, we're not supposed to overstep the success that a father had, which could be great, it could be small, it could be challenging. So,
Wow,
and
that's very crushing for a man then.
it's not conscious. This is something that plays out it's almost in our DNA, because we're raised by this man who's our father. So and of course, even as he grows in manhood, he's still our father. So he's always like ahead of
Your
us.
hero.
And there's some part of us that has this buy-in, even if it's bad. I mean, my dad did okay, but he wasn't like a multi-millionaire or anything else. But I didn't realize to look back is that I had limitations on my own success in the world that I had put in place because of the way my father had been, that I didn't want to exceed. And again, this is not something I intended to do or thought about. I just
Subconscious.
it's like, wow. So, and the thing is that most fathers don't want that for their sons. They want their sons to exceed them, to go further. But
Yes.
there's some wiring in it. Maybe it's biological, I'm not sure, but it's some part of us as it's set up that way. And so the idea about living as if our father is dead means don't let any image of a father hold us back from being ourselves. So for a lot of men, and for some men they did that because they were so rebellious against their fathers. They're like, no way, I'm going to stay that small. I'm going to do what I want. But for a lot of men, they're still caught up in that paradigm where we've caught the belief, again, unconscious belief, way deep in the subconscious, that was basically don't step over that line, don't exceed that mindset. That was one of the things that I learned big time. And purpose work will, by definition for me, exceed where your father was, because most of our fathers didn't have a purpose in life, weren't driven by a massive goal that wasn't about, because some men, go to um, make their way in the world and then, get the lots of money in the bank and then have raise a family, and that's great. That might not be a purpose. That may just be a goal. Purpose is something that lights you up every day, that fuels you, that impacts the world in a positive way. The way that I look at it is, in the best way of looking at it, raise it to a highest level, we would be not so much a knight in shining armor, but a benevolent king, meaning that we live from the place of total authority in our lives, not above anybody else, but in our own lives.
Hmm.
But we are kind to those around us and living our world, work in the world that makes a difference in the world and uplifts the rest of the planet. That for me is what purpose is about.
Wow. Makes a lot of sense. So what was the name of that book by David Data?
David Data is his last name is Deida. It's pronounced Data, but it's Deida. It's The Way of the Superior Man. It's been out about 35, 40 years. It's a classic book of his. It's a foundational book. He's written probably 10 books, maybe more.
Wow.
And yeah, he has some. He's very entertaining to listen to. He's a little strange too. I've been to his retreats a few times too. He's quite a teacher. I worked with quite a few of them, but his teachings though get really down to some of the visceral levels, which are really helpful.
So, okay, so I can't even begin to imagine what was going through your head. And as you were, having these different levels of knowingness and you're like having to act as if your father were dead. Um, was any aspect of that mind-boggling to you? Or did it just make so
Oh,
much sense and resonate with you? It's like, yeah, I don't know why I understand this, but I know that this is really what needs to happen.
well, in his book in particular, because I was again studying with him before the book. In the book, there are over 32 different principles, and some of them were, oh, of course, but quite a few of them are like, you mean what? and and definitely for me, I was lucky enough to start the right place with the teacher I went through before, went to David Data's work that really preempted or pre-loaded that understanding for me. So when I got to his work, it was expansive and additive without being too far outside my framework. And again, I've been on this journey for a long time. So my comfort zone and my willingness to learn are fairly expanded. So I've always found myself intrigued or open to learning new things all the time. I mean, every day things are learning now, but it's also different teachers show up with great information. And at the same time, I've also learned, thankfully, over the years to have great discernment about which teachers work for me, which ones don't, and be okay with that. So the teachings that he brought forward were some of them were just like, what? You mean what by this? And it took me a while to grapple it. So now it's easy to talk about because I've really gone into wrestle with and understand what those things meant for me. And some of the other pieces were like, oh, of course, it makes sense. So it was a spectrum.
So it's a spectrum, which, as you know, that's part of the life learning process as you digest and receive things. And
Yep.
I that those things that we perceive that are weird about whoever it is whoever that teacher, that mentor, that trainer that's in front of us that has been divinely put there, because make no mistakes, it's not an accident. I think that those weird aspects are there to catch our attention for us to go, what did he just say? Kind of like when you said, to live your life and act as if your father were dead. It's like, whoa,
Right.
whoa, whoa, because most people, and I'm not going to say no one, most people don't want their father to be dead. Some do.
Absolutely.
There's
Correct.
some that have had such a horrific thing go on that they've already, casted them off as dead. But most people, human nature is you want your parents to live as long as possible. So to have your parent, your father to be alive and then to act as if they were dead, it's like, okay. And obviously this is from an energetic and an inward perspective so that you could be that king, that emperor, you can be the master of your domain.
Right.
So as you heard these things that made your ears go, I like my sound effects. I'm sure, of course, it's eye and ear catching. So you're like,
Mhm.
whoa, 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 whoa. So did you make a conscious decision to go, okay, wait a minute. He just said this. Did you make a conscious decision to take one, two, three of those and say, okay, this is kind of different. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And then you did that and then moved on to others? Or did you kind of just decide it's like, okay, wow, this is definitely new and novel. I'm going to consider adopting these two or three things and just see how it goes. How did you approach it?
I saw what's interesting because after when I started reading the book, I ended up leading a men's group with this book. So we did like a book, or we did like a book club with the book and talked about it, discussed each chapter as we went through. So I made it intentional to just really dive into conversation with the men to really understand it more fully. So for me, it was ultimately the whole book, um, all the teachings. Not that they were the rules of the road; they weren't like the Ten Commandment type thing. They were just teachings to work with. But for me, the whole book offered pieces of the puzzle that made sense to me, and there's more always. And I found that it was a good baseline to build from. And some of these were definitely dramatic and challenging. Some are very simple. Another one in the book was trying to where it was. So live your purpose, live as your father is dead. There's I'm trying to remember the other ones now. There was one you put in there, which is never expect to understand your woman, which was
that
fascinating.
mind-boggling to you too?
Well, no, it was more a relief.
Oh, wait
because,
a minute. Pause button. You said it was a relief?
yes.
Oh, you got to expound on that.
Now,
Please.
definitely my work, because the work I do is different from that. But for most men, and for me at that time, was kind of like I'd always trying to figure women out, and it's like we are not wired the same. This is back to John Gray, his stuff at Mars and Venus. There's clearly differences in the way we function. In fact,
Yeah, thank
I would
God.
recommend to anybody watching this who haven't checked this out. There's a minister or a pastor in I want to say South Carolina, I think, named Mark Gungor, Gungor. He's got videos on YouTube. He basically did a series of talks in his church called the Tale of Two Brains.
They're so different.
Yeah, it's like the story of two brains, and it's there's a bunch of videos on YouTube. It's like I think it's about 4 hour long, or you can get like different clips of it. But one clip in particular, he has on the stage on the dais where he's standing these two 3 foot high pillars, and on top on top of each one are two I used to call them phonology heads, those porcelain heads that have bumps on them with like grid marks on them, which are basically what psychiatrists use. So because they one on each, one of them was plain, the other one had a scarf and lipstick on it. So he said one of them's a man's brain, one's a woman's brain, tale of two brains. And he said, and this is the thing I love because the way he illustrated was just so on point. He said, okay, so when you are basically the way a man's woman brain's wired is lots of little boxes all on separate compartments, all isolated from each other. So when you ask a man a question about something that happened in his memory, it's like you go into his brain, you find that one box that has that one thought in it, take it out without touching anything else, open the box, give it the answer, which is one answer about one thing, put it back in the box, put the box back in without touching anything else, all good. A woman's brain, everything is connected. So you ask a woman about something happened last week, she'll bring out the information about what it's about, and then everything that's connected to it as well.
3 to 6 boxes open up at the same time.
Right. How warm it was, what she was wearing, how she felt, who was around her, how, all those things around it, because that's the way women store information is collectively. Whereas man's brain is all about isolation, facts, dots, little isolated facts. So when he says in the book, no expect to understand your woman, this is what he meant, is that the way that I think of things, the way that a woman thinks of things are different. And that's okay. The big thing is, it's okay. Because we'll never really understand each other's thinking. I've had to learn how to do that because the work I do with women in my coaching, as well as working with men, is I had to understand this. So when I talk to a woman, I know that what I'm talking to is a different orientation than I have. And that's okay.
It's okay. And thank God it's that it's that way. The human species would not survive, as John Gray, you mentioned John Gray from Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He cites so many different studies, and he talks about how in order for our species to propagate and for it to survive, it's the only way it could possibly be. Otherwise, we would not survive. And so we're here coming on the home front. I wish we had another hour or 2 or 3. You have to promise that you're going to come back and we're going to have to do a series on this, because this is Love and Money Secrets TV. The thing is, love touches anything and everything that we do. You can't separate the energy and the emotion of love with our existence on the planet. So it really does affect every aspect of our lives, whether you are aware of that or not. That's the absolute bottom line truth. So in parting here, we've got about 4 or 5 more minutes here. And so what is the one big takeaway? If you wanted to rattle somebody's cage and say, listen up here, I want you to pay attention, because this is no accident that you're right here, right now, at this time. And I want you to just give 1% reasonable doubt that there's a possibility that this is like hitting the bullseye for you. So what is that one thing that you want people to leave with? Because for the men who are listening to this, it's going straight to them, right? Going straight into their brains, straight into their hearts. But for the women who are listening to this, we have children who are men, we have boys, we have sons, we have fathers, we have some women have boyfriends, have fiancés, have husbands. So this is affecting everybody. So what's that one thing? Speak to the man that's looking at this right now.
Well, I'd actually go back to the beginning of what you started with, which is really the relationship with yourself. And I'll say it this way, is that first of all, the longest relationship you're ever going to have is the one with the one in the mirror, because that's who, the one you were born with, the one you're going to live life through with. So if you're not right with that one, no other relationship's going to work. Meaning that it's important that you put that relationship first, not above anything else, but to yourself. Meaning that if you're single, especially when you're single, because that's what I've been working on for quite a few years, is how do you navigate that relationship with yourself, the one in the mirror? How do you honor and lead life from a loving place that is fulfilling for you? Because first of all, when you do that, you won't need somebody else to make you whole. Second piece is that when you meet somebody and you're in that place, when they're whole too, you have a possibility of an amazing relationship together. And the other part also is when you live a life that's that full with your own love, your own fulfillment, you learn that relationship is not about codependency. It's about interdependency. That changes the whole paradigm because most of us have been raised up with codependent relationships. So when we break that pattern and learn how to live from a whole place, we have more ability to give from our overflow, less from need, and more able to love other people. And the other thing is, if we end up being alone, not being in a relationship, that's okay too.
You're fine. Those are wonderful parting words. And I want to really thank you for taking time. I know you're super busy. I know that you have quite the calendar to juggle. And I just really want to honor and respect you and say thank you for your taking time to share this wisdom. It's taken you an entire lifetime to learn this and to distill this and to compile it in a format that you can bring it all nice and neat to us with a little bow in the form of not just this broadcast, but also you've compiled a lot of that wisdom in the pages of the book that you've written. So I want you to just touch upon the title of the book and just give us a little brief summary about that book. I know that this episode dealt with the contents of that book. Just the last, minute or two on that.
So my book is called 50 Ways to Love Your Lover. Funny, as we just talked about, really the secret is 50 ways to be a better lover. But not in terms of Kama Sutra, it's more about the ways of functioning in the world. So 50 principles of being a better partner, having better relationships. It was written for men and for women, and for if you're in a relationship or not, it's a really helpful book. It's been out over 10 years now. Get on Amazon. All the information about that book and my podcast, I have that QR code on my screen, so anybody who's watching it video-wise can just scan that and can find all my links. But it's on Amazon if you get the book. I have another book brewing that's been on the fence for a while. I just had another download this morning, another piece of it. So there will be a second book coming out soon. No plan on when. But that book's been the first one that came out that really sort of landed my message on the planet. So definitely recommend people reading it.
Fantastic. Okay, so there we have. It's called 50 Ways to Love Your Lover by Barry Selby. You can find it on Amazon. I want to encourage you guys to run out and get your paperback, get your hardcover of that book. Follow him on Amazon. And when you read the book, I would love for you to put in the comments below that you got the book. And as you're reading it, we can have a discussion. Barry, I hope that you come back and you watch the YouTube channel and that you chime in and you don't just let me do all the answering. I would love for you to engage them in conversation. Do you have a YouTube channel that people can follow and subscribe to you on?
Absolutely. My YouTube channel is my name. In fact, all my social media apart from Instagram is my name, which is Barry Selby. So youtube.com/Barry Selby is how you find me.
youtube.com/Barry Selby. That's Barry Selby, Selby, just like you saw on the screen. Thank you, my beautiful friend and gem. I am so happy and excited. I'm so lucky that I have you only an hour away. You're here in LA. So I'm sure we will be on other platforms together. We met through the platform that we were both on, and I'm just so happy and excited that our paths have crossed. So there you have it, my friends and gems. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in, turning on to Love and Money Secrets TV. Put in the comments below where you're located and what was your biggest aha from today's episode. And if you had Barry in front of you and you could have a dialogue and a conversation, what is that burning question that you want to ask him, pick his brain and find out about? Put it in the comments below, because he is going to chime in. You know that, of course, I'm going to chime in and I'm going to answer, but he is going to chime in and he's personally going to respond to you. How much better can it get? It can get infinitely better. So thank you for tuning in. All right, Barry, take care. Have a great one.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.